Who gave you the right to stand there and call yourself her mother? I am her mother. I gave birth to her. That is a fact no one in this room can change. You gave birth to her. And then you left her on my doorstep in a plastic bag. In the rain. That was a long time ago. People change.
Yes, they do. Amara changed. She grew. She healed. She became everything you see in that hall today. And you had nothing to do with any of it. She is still my blood. Blood did not sit with her when she had fever at 3 in the morning. Blood did not work double shifts to pay her school fees. Blood did not hold her when her first heartbreak. I came at 17. I did. So whatever you came here to claim today, you should think very carefully before you take another step into that hall.
The morning of Amara's wedding, Grace ironed her ankara wrapper 4 times. Not because it was wrinkled. It was not wrinkled. She ironed it because her hand needed something to do. Because if her hand stayed still, she would start to feel everything she had been pushing down since the invitation cards went out 3 weeks ago. And she was not ready to feel all of it yet. Not today. Today had to be perfect. Today was Amara's day. She had known Amara longer than Amara knew herself. 22 years ago, on a Tuesday night in October, rain beating the zinc roof of her small apartment in Surulere, Grace had heard something outside her door. She almost did not open it. She was tired from work. Her feet ached. And the rain was the kind that made you want to pull your wrapper tighter and stay inside until morning. But something made her rise. Something she could not explain then and still could not explain now. She opened the door and looked down. A baby, wrapped in a thin cloth inside a black polythene bag, the top loosely knotted to keep the rain out. The baby was not crying. She was just lying there, eyes wide open, looking up at Grace with a calmness that made no sense for a child in that situation. As if she had already decided to trust whoever opened that door. Grace looked left. She looked right. The corridor was empty. The rain swallowed every sound. She picked the baby up. She told herself it was temporary. She told the neighbors it was her sister's child. She told the landlord she was babysitting for a friend. She told herself every version of the story that would make what she was doing feel manageable, feel logical, feel like something that had a clear end point. But weeks passed, then months. Then the baby began to smile specifically at Grace, to reach for Grace's face with both small hands, to cry when Grace left the room and stop crying the moment she came back. And Grace understood that there was no end point. There was only forward. She named her Amara. It meant grace in Igbo, and Grace thought that was right, because the child had come to her like grace comes, unannounced, unearned, and completely transforming. The years that followed were not easy. Grace was a seamstress working from a single room. She had no husband, no family close by, no safety net. What she had
was skill, stubbornness, and a child who made every sacrifice feel like it had a reason. She sewed through the night so Amara could have new shoes at the start of every school year. She joined a cooperative and saved carefully so Amara could attend a proper secondary school in Lekki. She ate less on the days money ran thin, always making sure Amara's plate was full, always making sure Amara never saw the worry on her face. When Amara came home with her first report card showing first position in her class, Grace sat outside on the veranda after the girl had gone to sleep and cried quietly into her wrapper. Not from sadness, from something much bigger than sadness. From the particular joy that only comes when you have poured everything you have into something and watched it become more than you imagined. Amara grew into a young woman of remarkable warmth. She had Grace's carefulness, Grace's attention to detail, Grace's habit of noticing when people around her were struggling. She studied business administration at the University of Lagos, graduated with second-class upper, and found work in a shipping company in Victoria Island within 3 months. She was the kind of person people trusted immediately, the kind of person who remembered names, who showed up, who followed through. She met Daniel at a friend's birthday gathering in Ikoyi. He was an engineer, quietly confident, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. They dated for 2 years before he came to Grace, not Amara's biological family, not any uncle or distant relative, but Grace, to ask permission to marry her daughter. He sat across from Grace in her sitting room in Surulere, the same room where Amara had taken her first steps, and he said clearly, "You are her mother. This is where I come to ask." Grace had to excuse herself to go to the kitchen for 5 minutes. She came back composed and told him yes. The wedding was held at a church in Lekki, reception at a hall in Victoria Island. 300 guests. Amara was radiant in ivory lace, her hair pinned with small gold flowers, her smile the kind that comes from genuine happiness. Grace sat in the front row and thought this is what all of it was for. Every night shift, every skipped meal, every year of choosing this child over every other option. This moment, this girl, this life. She did not see the woman arrive. She only noticed when the energy in the hall shifted. A low murmur passing through the tables near the entrance, heads turning, whispers moving like a current through water. Grace turned to look and felt something cold settle in her chest. The woman was tall, dressed in red sequined fabric that caught every light in the room. She was beautiful in a polished, expensive way, the kind of beauty that comes with money and maintenance. She was perhaps 45, perhaps a little older, but she wore her age with the confidence of someone who had never gone without. She moved through the hall with the ease of someone who believed she belonged wherever she stood. Grace had never seen her before in her life, but she knew. She knew in the way body knows things before the mind catches up, the way a cold wind arrives before the rain. She watched the woman approach Amara at the high table, watched her take Amara's hands, watched Amara's face change. First confusion, then something Grace could not read from across the room. The woman leaned close and said something in Amara's ear. Amara went very still. Then the woman turned to Daniel's mother seated beside Amara and introduced herself. Grace could not hear the words, but she saw Daniel's mother's face open in surprise, saw her reach out and take the woman's hand, saw the warmth of a misunderstanding spreading across that table like something spilled and impossible to take back. She saw Daniel's mother look toward her, toward Grace, with a new expression, not hostile, confused, recalibrating. Grace stood up. She walked across that hall slowly, greeting no one, stopping for nothing, her blue ankara wrapper moving quietly around her as she crossed the distance between herself and everything she had spent 22 years building. People noticed her walking. The murmur grew. By the time she reached the entrance where the woman had paused to speak to a coordinator, the entire hall had developed the particular stillness of people watching something they do not yet understand but cannot look away from. What followed was not loud. It was not the public explosion people would later describe to those who had not been there. It was two women standing at the threshold of a wedding hall, speaking in low, controlled voices while the world watched. The woman said she had been young. She said she had been desperate. She said she had made a decision she regretted every day since. She said she had spent years looking, years building herself up enough to come back, years gathering the courage to stand here today. Grace listened to all of it. Then she asked one question. Did you come here for Amara, or did you come here for what Amara has become? The woman did not answer immediately, and that pause, that small revealing pause, was the only answer that mattered. Grace nodded once, then she turned and walked back to her seat.
What happened next was Amara's choice. Grace had always believed that. She had raised Amara to think clearly, to feel deeply, and to decide for herself. She would not make this decision for her. She sat in her chair and folded her hands in her lap and waited. Amara left the high table. She walked past her mother-in-law, past Daniel, reached for her hand, past the coordinator, past the watching guests. She walked to where the woman in red was still standing near the entrance. And in a voice that carried, not because she raised it, but because the hall had gone completely silent, she said, "I knew about you. I found out when I was 19. I hired someone to find the records. I read everything. I know exactly what happened that night, and I know exactly who you are." The woman's composure cracked slightly. "Then you know I had no choice." "You had a choice," Amara said. "You made it." And then another woman who had nothing, no husband, no family, no extra money, nothing. She made her choice too. She opened her door. She picked me up. She kept me. Amara's voice did not waver. "I am not angry at you. I release you from my anger completely. But I need you to understand something clearly. I have a mother. She is sitting in the front row in a blue ankara wrapper, and she ironed it 4 times this morning because she was nervous about my happiness. That is my mother. Today is her day as much as it is mine, and I will not allow anything to take that from her." She turned and walked back to the high table. The woman in red stood alone at the entrance for a long moment. Then she walked out. The hall exhaled. Daniel's mother was the first to stand. She crossed the room to where Grace sat, still composed, still folded, and she took both of Grace's hands in hers and held them. She did not speak immediately. When she did, she said only, "Thank you for what you gave my son's wife." Grace pressed her lips together and nodded. The celebration continued. The music returned. The food was served. People danced. Amara caught Grace's eye from the high table and held her gaze for a long moment, and between them passed everything that had no words. Every night, every sacrifice, every morning Grace had risen before the sun to make sure this child had what she needed to become who she was. Grace smiled. Amara smiled back. That was enough. That was everything. The woman in red sequins did not disappear from the story. That was not how life worked, and Grace had lived long enough to know it. She tried twice more in the months following the wedding. First, through a mutual contact, asking if Amara would meet her for lunch. Amara sent a polite, brief message saying she wished her well and needed time. The second time, she sent a letter to Grace directly, handwritten, several pages, full of explanations and expressions of regret that were clearly genuine and clearly too late. Grace read the letter twice, then she put it in a drawer. She did not respond with anger. She did not respond with coldness. She understood that the woman was suffering the particular suffering of someone who had made an irreversible choice and had to live with its full weight. There was no satisfaction in that for Grace. She was not built for satisfaction in another person's pain. What she felt was simpler than that, quieter. She felt free. The years of wondering, the years of watching Amara's face and wondering if one day someone would come and try to undo what she had built, those years were over. The wedding had settled something, not dramatically, not with the noise of a public reckoning, but with the quiet permanence of truth landing exactly where it was meant to land. Amara called every Sunday. She came with Daniel on the last Saturday of every month, and they sat together in Grace's sitting room in Surulere, the same room, the same walls, and ate jollof rice and argued about football and talked about everything and nothing, the way families do when they are not performing family, but simply living it. One Sunday evening, about a year after the wedding, Amara called and told Grace she was pregnant. Grace sat down on her bed and covered her face with both hands and thanked God slowly and thoroughly, the way you thank someone when the gratitude is too big for ordinary words. When she uncovered her face, she was already planning what she would sew for the baby. The woman in the red sequined gown came to Grace's door 8 months after the wedding. Not planned, not announced. Grace opened the door and found her standing there, and the contrast with how she had looked that evening in the hall was sharp and honest. The polish was still there, but sitting differently. Something underneath it had shifted. She asked if she could come in. Grace considered her for a moment, then she stepped aside. She made tea. She set 2 cups on the table. She sat across from the woman who had given birth to her daughter, and she waited. The woman spoke for a long time, about the years before, about the fear she had been carrying, about the choices that seemed impossible at the time, about watching from a distance as Amara grew up, as the records she had quietly tracked showed her moving from primary to secondary to university to employment to marriage, about the accumulation of regret that could not be spent or redirected or resolved, about the way the wedding had broken something open in her and left her unable to pretend anymore. Grace listened to all of it. When the woman finished, Grace was quiet for a while. Then she said, "I don't hate you. I want you to hear that clearly. I don't hate you, and I don't need you to suffer for me to feel whole. What you did gave me Amara, and Amara is the best thing in my life. So, in a way I cannot fully explain, I am grateful for the door opening that night." The woman's eyes filled. "But I need you to understand," Grace continued, "that what you are carrying, that weight, I cannot take it from you. Only you can put it down. And you can only put it down by accepting that some things cannot be undone. The years are gone. The childhood is gone. What remains is a young woman who has chosen her life, chosen her mother, chosen what she wants to carry and what she wants to release. That is her right, and you must respect it." She stood and picked up her cup. "Amara will come to you in her own time, all she wants. That is not mine to decide. But you will not come here again unannounced, and you will not approach her with pressure or urgency. If there is ever a relationship to be built, it will be on her terms and in her time. Those are the only terms available." She walked to the door and opened it. The woman sat for a moment longer, then she rose, smoothed her clothing, and walked out. Grace closed the door quietly. She stood in the middle of her sitting room, the same room where a baby took her first steps, said her first word, cried her first real cry over a boy who did not deserve her tears, and she felt the particular peace of a woman who had done a hard thing fully and asked for nothing back. Outside, evening was falling over Surulere. The smell of cooking coming from the next compound, someone's radio playing an old Sunny Ade song, the ordinary sounds of a life that was, in every way that mattered, a good one. Grace went to the kitchen to start her dinner. She was expecting Amara on Saturday. She raised another woman's child for 22 years and asked for nothing. The biological mother came back only after the success. Was Grace wrong to let her into her home at all? Or was that the greatest show of strength in the entire story? Drop your answer below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. And drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.